Hey, it's Ron McLean. Welcome to Hockey Talk on the Rock.
With Laura and Keith.
It's interesting.
So let's back up a second.
He played absolutely out of his mind.
It made no sense to me.
And now, here are your hosts.
All right, here we go. We are back with another episode of Hockey Talk on the Rock. We are on number 55. It is October 28th today. That's Laura. I'm Keith, doing our Zoom thing, and it feels like it's been a while because actually the last time we talked, we actually got together with our friend Trevor Kempner on Kempner Sports. Check him out, Kempner Sports on YouTube, and subscribe, like, comment. He loves all that. So we talked about a lot of Canucks stuff with him, about a few games that went by. So on our own show, we haven't talked in a while. So we've got some stuff. We'll start with Nucks news. I've got quite a bit of Nucks news for once, and you always have lots of Nucks thoughts. So let's get going.
Okay, before we get into the Canucks stuff, I'm just gonna briefly mention, I guess, a bit of the elephant in the room, which with hockey right now is the whole Kyle Beach situation. I feel like, again, our podcast is pretty upbeat and hasn't focused on, negative aspects of hockey, but I just want to give him, props for stepping forward. And if you haven't had the chance to listen to that interview with Rick Westhead, it is honestly probably the most impactful interview I've ever seen in terms of hockey. And that whole situation was a complete disaster. And I really hope that something good comes out of it. And I just want to say that. And kind of when we get further into league news, stuff connects back to it, right? But I just wanted to get it out of the way, kind of.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm just wanting to acknowledge it was awful, and I acknowledge the courage it took for him to come forward. But I don't really want to talk much about it myself.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So okay.
Okay.
Elephant in the room.
So back to the Canucks. So they had a week. I don't know. Again, what did we talk about? What did we talk about last time? They played the first ever home game in Seattle, which was a big victory for the Canucks. Come from behind, third period win, and that was very exciting. I thought that game had kind of a playoff vibe to it. I was very happy that they managed to pull it off. But there's still aspects with the Canucks right now that, I don't know, I'm not totally liking. And it's not just because of their results, right? They're pretty much a 500 hockey team right now. And we'll see what happens tonight, because they followed up that big win in Seattle with I'm going to say a pretty disappointing home opener. I don't really think they showed up. I felt like they were kind of the passengers in that game. And it
was a slow kind of game. It felt like Minnesota old school games, but Vancouver was Minnesota. And I mean, they just couldn't sustain any energetic play. You'd see quick little bursts of it, but they didn't seem like the crowd and them merged their energies together to make for a good game on their behalf. I mean, I had a couple of notes about there's been some struggling on the defensive end, and it's mainly that third pairing. I feel like a lot of people are giving props to Tyler Myers and Tucker Poolman, and then obviously Hughes and Ekman Larson have been very good, but you can really see it in that third pair, and it seems like Rathbone's struggled quite a bit. Maybe trying to do too much at times, and Burroughs has had his moments, and Shen's kind of struggled. So the reason I bring this up is because Jim announced this week, Big Jim Benning, that Travis Hamonic is back in Vancouver and starting to report to Abbotsford. Maybe he already has or whatever. So it feels like good timing, even if he does come into the lineup and only plays on the third pair. I don't think he's going to be a downgrade at this point, but he hasn't played, so we'll see.
Yeah, from what I heard, I think he practiced with Abbotsford this morning, and it sounded like the people that were there said his presence was noticeable in the sense that his skill was a lot higher than the AHL players he was playing with, which I'm going to take as a good sign, because again, you don't know how much he's been skating or how in shape he is, but I feel like maybe, he plays a couple of games in Abbotsford and then he'll be ready to join the Canucks, and we'll see if he gets into game as early as next week, possibly. So again, I agree with you. It's a good sign. I know we both are like, I'm fond of Travis Hamonic on the Canucks. I think he brings something to the team that they need, and I agree with you. I think that the depth on defense right now is it should be the team's biggest issue. I don't know if it is the team's biggest issue right now, but I mean, Demko in general has played outstanding, and I think he's covered up a lot of the defensive issues with the Canucks. So
yeah, totally agree. And I was just looking through the stats because I was trying to be learned here before we came into this talk. And the Canucks have 20 goals for, which is probably a little low. I think low based on expectations with how much they added to their top 9, especially this offseason.
Yeah.
And then 21 goals against, which is too much.
Yeah.
And like you said, Demko has played really well. So everyone's talking about how Petey's struggling. And sure. But what's going on with Boeser? It seems like he was injured and missed a couple games, but he definitely hasn't looked like Boeser from last year, and he was the most dominant player on the team last year.
Yeah, so I'm wondering with Boeser if whatever his injury was, if it's still bugging him. Because to me, this reminds me a lot of his second year when he came off of his really good rookie season, and then he got injured early in the season, and everyone was kind of like, what's wrong with him? Like, he looked really bad. And then it came out that I can't remember what his injury was that year, but he had something wrong with him and he didn't play for a long time. So I'm wondering if it's injury related. I mean, the other possibility is that the Canucks, they've mixed up their lines a lot, and part of that is because they haven't had production, so I get it. But if you think about both Petey and Boeser, who essentially missed, like, Pettersson missed all of training camp and then came in for some preseason games. Boeser was there for the preseason but missed a bunch of those preseason games at the end, and I wonder if maybe they're just not getting the feel. I don't know exactly what the answer is with the two of them. I will say Pettersson, I wasn't worried about, but the longer it goes on with him not being able to dominate 5-on-5, the more concerned I am.
Yeah.
And I said to you, like, it's great they got that power play goal on Tuesday, but like, for me, the personnel they're putting out, everyone wants to like harp on Chase on, and that's fine. Like, I think the reason he's on the team is because he is like a power play specialist. I actually don't have a problem with him, but like, in terms of, again, for me, I would put Boeser on that first power play unit, possibly even above Horvat, and just see what he can do, except for the fact that I also think he should be up on one of the points. And I've been very like strong-minded in this since last year when he did basically do that. But I think he's more effective than JT Miller, and I actually think he's more effective than Pettersson right now. And again, part of the problem that we talked about with the Canucks power play is they seem to just pass it around to try and get a shot from Pettersson, and everyone knows that, and it doesn't work. I think if you switch people around maybe a bit, something might spark up. But again, I don't know. And on that note, I know it's just harsh on Horvat, but Horvat did have, I would say he's the most noticeable player against Minnesota. So
yeah, no, I agree with the power play stuff. I was going to touch on that too, because we talked with Trev about that last week, and like, it's got to be the most predictable power play in the league right now. And they got to do something. I understand Chason there, because like, Chason's going to be the guy who can plant himself in front of the net and get the dirty, greasy goals that maybe go in off his leg or whatever. But like, who else on the Canucks roster right now is that guy besides him, right?
I would honestly give Connor Garland a chance.
Right, but we haven't seen it, so we don't know.
But like, to me, I think about his style of play, and I think he'd be willing to do it. Okay, he doesn't have the big body, so if that's what they're going for, then yeah, you're right. Chason is your only option.
Right, because same thing with Miller. Like, he's scrappy. He could be in front of the net, but he's not that big.
No.
Similar with Bo, so it makes sense from, maybe he doesn't have to be on the first power play. But what I was going to get into was, speaking of predictable power play,
Yeah.
I was listening to, I can't remember who they were interviewing, but he was talking about Ovechkin, how he's got like, what, 8 goals already this year. It's so great. Like, it's so awesome. And like he talked about how, yeah, we know on the power play that shot's going to come to Ovechkin, and still it somehow got there, and he still got all those power play goals.
Yeah.
And you know, that's why I think you're totally dead on with having Brock on the other side. It's because then by doing that, it's kind of like the Washington thing where you have John Carlson manning the point. You've got Ovi in his spot where Boeser would be. You've got, you know, Backstrom or Oshie or whoever on the other side who can make plays or shoot, or like, you've got to have more options. And if they're not going to be the type of team like the Oilers, like I talked about before, who where their stars are going to skate around and make the defense chase them around, make the coverages switch up, you know, open up those lanes, which they don't really do. They got to have that option on the other side, or else we just know what's happening. It's going to Petey.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But for tonight, I'm not hoping for all these changes to happen because you're otherwise, and you know, it's a big game. We're getting this in, you know, half an hour before puck drops, maybe a little more than half hour before the Flyers take on the Canucks. Quickly,
Yes.
we're going to a Canucks game later in the year.
Yes.
Loser of tonight's game buys 2 rounds at the game.
Fine.
Okay.
That's better. I'm like, come on, Canucks, you better do it.
Well, advantage you because the Flyers played last night and traveled, so
that's true. So we'll see how up. It's a battle of the backup goalies too, so that'll be interesting.
Yep.
And yeah, tonight will be an interesting game because I feel like the Canucks and the Flyers always kind of put on an entertaining game anyway. And yeah, we'll see.
Yeah,
see how it goes. I feel like there could be a lot of goals.
That's what I said last night, because I bet on the game last night with a friend who's a big Oilers fan.
Yeah.
And it just seems like the Flyers always get up for this Western Canada road trip.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to it. And Martin Jones is a BC boy, if I'm not wrong. So
he is, yeah.
Maybe he'll be inspired, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I don't have much more on the Canucks news. I'm excited for tonight's game. They've done some funny line juggling. I'm happy to see Podkolzin getting an opportunity with some good players again.
Yeah, and see, this is the thing that frustrated me about that last game, like with Minnesota. I was really excited that Podkolzin was on like the second line. And I thought he was actually very noticeable in his first couple shifts. And then I think he only played like 6 minutes in the whole game. And like, I'm not a coach. I don't understand exactly what they're looking for. But to me, he seems to be like creating something when he's on the ice, which at times for the Canucks is very apt. So I don't know. I hope that him starting on that second line tonight means that he's going to get more of a look, and it's not just to start and then, okay, we're going to jumble things up again and, 5 minutes into the game.
Yeah, totally agree. Except the Flyers are going to win. So moving into league news, I really only had there was one minor trade, big whoop, like Ottawa traded San Jose 7th rounder back to San Jose, or the center Dylan Gambrell, which whatever, he's played some games. I just put kind of a win for Ottawa because their center depth is being tested. They've got so many injuries already to their centermen.
Yeah, sure.
They kind of need to bring in a centerman, and whatever, it was San Jose's 7th round.
Yeah.
Well, I put that out there because it's, besides all of the good hockey being played, there hasn't really been a lot of news in terms of signing or trades anymore. So yeah. So from there, unless you've got anything else team related or league related, I was going to move into the top 3 starts. Now, maybe not top 3 starts is the way to word it, but maybe the kind of surprising 3 starts.
Yeah, I agree. I think I already agree with what you're going to say, but do you want to go first?
Sure. I'll just list off my teams and then we can kind of talk after, I guess.
Okay.
So I try not to go with just picking all the teams that were undefeated.
Yeah.
So I did go with Florida,
Okay.
just because I find it pretty impressive what they're doing. And again, I'll touch on it in a minute. And then I got San Jose, and then I got Detroit.
Yeah, so I was kind of similar to you, except for instead of Florida, because I felt like that one was maybe a little bit more predictable than Carolina. I took Carolina because I thought they would have taken a step back this year. We talked about it before, and I mean, I can talk about it in more depth in a sec, but I just think it's more fascinating than Florida, who I also think have had obviously a very good start, but maybe it was a little bit more predictable. And then I agree, I put Detroit and San Jose for the other two. And again, like both of them, those two teams, like you could pick Buffalo here, but I feel like Buffalo has kind of gotten a bit lucky because they've played some easier teams, although they did beat Tampa. Didn't they beat Tampa, or was that Detroit?
They did beat Tampa, but Brian Elliott was in net, so I'm not giving them a whole lot on that.
But anyway, Detroit has played good teams, and so has San Jose, and they're getting wins, and I think both of them are very impressive for the level that they're at. And that Lucas Raymond kid in Detroit looks like he's the real deal, and Moritz Seider has played very well from what I've heard. So the young guys are coming up there, and I don't know what's going on in San Jose, if there's like a rejuvenation or if things are just working out and then they're going to collapse, but they have had an impressive start.
All right, so you basically had what I had for Detroit. I just had the young stars are emerging, basically, like Raymond, Seider, Zadina are obviously all emerging, and it's great for them. Obviously, I think Stevie Y made a great trade to get Nedeljkovic out of Carolina. I understand they signed Anderson. He's playing well, but he was a Calder finalist. It was kind of weird that they moved on from him. So good for Detroit for bringing him in. And they've been good. I don't buy that they're going to be like a playoff team, but you can see where it's going.
Yeah.
San Jose, I'm going to take credit for my own theory as being an original theory, because it's probably not, but I haven't heard anybody else talk about it. So everybody keeps talking about mainly that, hey, Evander Kane's not there, and maybe it was him. And then the second theory I've heard is they've got some rejuvenation, young blood coming into the lineup with Eklund and Gadjevich and Dahlin and blah, blah, blah. My theory is the team had zero confidence in their goalies, Martin Jones and whoever the backup was, Aaron Jones. None whatsoever. Yeah. And just simply by buying out Jones and bringing in Aiden Hill and James Reimer has given the team that confidence that they're lacking. That's my theory.
Yeah, and I mean, if that is the case, it is quite crazy, right? Like, in the sense, like what Doug Wilson did, because both Aiden Hill and James Reimer at this stage of their careers were still not unknowns, but wild cards, right? Like there's some potential with Aiden Hill, I feel like, in Arizona, but like who knew he was going to be a starter? And then James Reimer has had his ups and downs, and they both look good and that team is impressive. I'm gonna say it's probably some sort of combination of the three. I do think, like, obviously the Evander Kane thing, if again it's another fun topic for tonight's episode, but if he was that much of a distraction in the locker room, then I'm not surprised that they are playing a lot better, just because again you heard like Tomas Hertl and stuff basically saying he didn't want him to come back, and that's going to be something interesting to watch, because I don't know what they're going to do with that whole situation, but I could see like an increase in play because they're not there, but to be this much better, probably not. So I'll say it's somewhat of a combination.
Do you think there's any chance that when he's come back from a suspension that they would send him to the minors?
I have no idea.
Right?
Yeah,
I don't know.
They can't terminate the contract. I know that for sure.
But they can sink him. Like, they would still have to pay him a lot of money, but they could totally sink him if the team doesn't want him around. Or they could even hope that some team, maybe Carolina, since they took a flyer on D'Angelo, would claim him.
Yeah.
Maybe. But so I also kind of think too, at the beginning of the season here, that teams like San Jose and Detroit and Buffalo are doing well, because I feel like they've been taken back a little bit.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see that wear off.
Yeah, I definitely think with Buffalo for sure. I feel like there's a lot of that, and again, probably for that team, a lot of the chip on their shoulder for we have pride in ourselves and we're NHL players and all that jazz is probably making them play a lot harder. So
Yeah.
yeah, but
And then I mean, just to cover the last one, Florida, like I just want to give them full credit for like, they added Sam and Sam last year.
yeah,
Um, but they were good. Like they were obviously very solid additions. They both been playing really well.
yeah,
And both goalies have seemed to have it figured out, which was kind of a question mark with
yeah.
Bobrovsky's inconsistency and would Knight be ready, and they seem to have it going. And you're gonna hate it, but we gotta give some props to Forsling. He seems to be emerging as a pretty solid, offensively contributing defenseman.
Good for him. I will say it's frustrating to watch sometimes as a Canucks fan, but I don't wish him any ill will. And I do think that team is very good. Like, did I pick them? No, I didn't pick them to make the final. I'm like, I think I picked them to win a round. That's what I did. But their offensive depth, I think, is probably one of the best in the league, and it's somehow still kind of underrated. And I know people have talked about for years how Barkov and now it seems to be Huberdeau are like the most underrated players in the league. But I think as a whole, when you look at that unit together, they're just ridiculously good, and they're fun to watch and to play. It will be interesting to see what happens, and this is where things kind of loop back, and I'm trying to avoid talking about it, but the rumor out there right now is that Quenneville's not going to coach, that he's done. So Florida is going to be fascinating to watch, because what are they going to do if that's true? And
right.
So
yeah, I wonder that as well. I kind of figured that's I'm interested to see what happens with Shovel Day off. I feel like Quenneville will be done. I agree with you. And I feel like Florida's going to just slap the interim on one of their assistants, like Ulf Samuelson or something.
Do you want to know what the big rumor is right now?
Don't say Torts.
Torts?
No. Okay, well, whatever.
I mean, I could kind of see it. I bet you if he was going to get talked into coaching somewhere, he'd be into Florida, having lived like in Tampa. And again, he seems to work better with more veteran groups. And I mean, I don't know if you can call Florida a veteran team, but they've got some guys there, and but we'll see.
I'll just say that maybe I'd be more of a believer in seeing one of the other two big guys out there, and in Julian or Boudreau ending up there before Torts.
Okay.
Do you want to touch on Carolina quickly, or did you?
Yeah, I mean, my thought with Carolina, like we talked about it in the offseason, I think both of us had them missing the playoffs.
I did. I was looking at my hot takes the other day, and I was like, oh, this is not good.
And again, like, who knows? Like, it's possible that Anderson's going to get hurt. You don't want to wish it on anyone, but he does have a history of injuries. And like, I just feel like they took so many steps back, and then they came out and they're just playing awesome. And props to Rod Brind'Amour, because I do think he's one of the top coaches in the league right now.
For sure. What they say that they have 9 different players on the roster from last year or something like that. Like,
yeah,
I understood they let the goalies go and let Dougie Hamilton go and made a couple trades, but yeah, they did bring in a lot of new bodies, and it's looking good so far. And like you say, credit to Rod Brind'Amour. So moving on to the worst 3 starts, or the surprisingly bad starts, we'll call it maybe.
Yeah.
That we're going to talk about. And I couldn't, I'm only going to touch on a couple of them really quickly because I couldn't narrow it down to 3. I got 5.
Okay.
I got 5. So I'll just throw 2 out of the way quickly.
Yeah.
And if you want to touch on them more, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I have Vegas down, but I've got they have big name injuries. Like when you lose Stone and Pacioretty for a long amount of time right away, like it kind of makes sense that your team's going to stumble, because those guys are pretty integral to their success. And then I had Colorado as well, but like we know they had COVID issues, and a lot of their players, like Nathan McKinnon, were out for the first few games. So
yeah,
it's kind of understandable, I feel like, in both those cases.
Yes.
So the other three, I had LA first.
Yeah.
I kind of want to gloat a little bit in sense of like lots of people had them picking to make the playoffs or be like close to the playoff, and like I don't know, I just wasn't buying it. I didn't feel like
Yeah.
they were ready, or maybe it's more my lack of belief in their goaltending tandem than anything. But I just didn't see it, and a couple of players have been putting up some points for them, but it's not overly surprising to me that they're like 1-4-2 or whatever they are.
Yeah. They've now lost Doughty too, right, for like 2 months.
Oh yeah.
That's gonna be like for them quite hard to overcome. But I agree with what you're saying. I also didn't fully buy the LA as the most improved team in hockey kind of thing. And yeah.
Then I had Montreal.
Yeah.
Also kind of a gloaty feeling to it because like I was definitely one of the probably many people that were like, I don't think they're going to be a playoff team this year, but who would have thought that they would be this bad?
Yeah.
I wouldn't think with a forward lineup that has like Toffoli and Hoffman and Suzuki and Cole Caulfield, like that they would be struggling so hard for goals, but they really are. And Allen hasn't looked good. So, I mean, Carey Price is obviously being heavily missed.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this is what kind of the pattern with Allen as a goalie has been, right? Like as a backup, he's really good, but if he has to have that pressure as a starter, he can't do it. And I think that Montreal is kind of seeing that now, unfortunately.
And I mean, who do they got to back? It was like Montembeau or something, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, they're in trouble. I was listening to the Merrick show, which is very good. And I like how he always has Friedge on there, and Friedge was saying like, at this point, I think they're already thinking to throw away the season and get into the Shane Wright sweepstakes, and probably wouldn't be a bad idea, even though they traded away one of their first rounders.
So the other really interesting thing with Montreal, just gonna keep bringing stuff back up, but is with Marc Bergevin, because this is the final year of his contract, and evidently he was offered a extension, but he kind of laughed it off. But Bergevin's super interesting, right, in terms of his hockey career, because he's been the GM of Montreal, I think, since I was in my second year of university, because I can remember when he got hired. It's been a very long time. He went through a time where everyone said he was like the worst GM in the league. And then he kind of rebuilt himself, I'm going to say. It was like this weird kind of up and down. And now if you ask people about like prospect groups in the NHL, Montreal's is one of the top ones that comes up. They have a lot of good young players. So obviously if they tank the season and they get like a Shane Wright, or I think there's a couple other guys kind of in that top class that are meant to be like really good, that's probably like excellent news for the team. It'd be excellent for everyone, but if you're adding someone to a group that's already pretty skilled, it's really good. But I'm wondering, like, is Bergevin's gonna be there? Are they just gonna let him walk, or what's gonna go on with that?
And you're thinking like Chicago could be a landing spot?
I don't think Chicago could be a landing spot. I mean, the other messed up thing, again, it ties back, is I know he was also a part of the Chicago stuff, but he hasn't been named. So I feel like it's probably that he didn't know. But part of the theory was maybe Montreal was waiting to see what came out of all that. And then also the rumor I heard was, keep hearing, is Florida, but I don't know what he would do in Florida.
Right.
But I think people seem to think that he also wants out of Montreal. Like, it's kind of mutual.
Stressful gig, and like you say, he's been doing it a long time.
Yeah, like the crazy thing, and I think I was gonna bring this up a couple weeks ago, but in Canada, like the GMs have all been around forever. Like the newest one is in Edmonton, right?
Yeah.
But he's been here for like what, 4 or 5 seasons now?
I would think more 3 or 4, but yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about Jim Benning in Vancouver. I think about, in Calgary, I'm forgetting names now, but yeah, this year for him is they're a team that also has started pretty well, which is surprising for me. But this year was kind of, you know, show and tell. Ottawa, somewhat newer. Obviously, Shovel Dayoff has
I
been.
feel like Dorian's been in Ottawa a while now, hasn't he?
He has, but has he been around for longer than I'm losing my mind now. Names of GMs. Edmonton's GM.
Ken Holland. Yes, he's definitely been in Ottawa longer than Holland.
Okay. But yeah, it's just interesting to see because I feel like a lot of these teams, this is kind of their put up or like their all or nothing year, which is the team we haven't talked about yet. But like Dubas, obviously in Toronto, is another one that if this year doesn't go well is probably done. And yeah, I'm sorry that was a tangent, but
that's all right. I only had one more team on my list of bad starts.
Yeah.
And I gotta eat crow because I didn't know what Chicago was, but man, was I wrong.
I feel very proud about this hot take from me, but that's okay.
So yeah, they made bold moves this offseason, kind of signaling that the rebuild / retool is over. And from what has happened so far, it did not work. Fleury looks not anything like the Fleury in Vegas. Seth Jones looks super overpaid already. I mean, they've got a little bit of COVID stuff going on, so Kane's not in the lineup, and Taves missed a bit of time, but like overall, it's been bad. So I was going to say Jeremy Colleton has to be on the hottest seat in the league right now, right? And do you not think that now that this all is happening, this other stuff, that maybe this is a time they would look at, hey, let's do a little distracting and we'll fire the coach and bring in somebody else? It's kind of like, look at the shiny object over here kind of move.
My hot take is almost the opposite. I feel like because Stan Bowman is now not around, that the Hawks might even just use that as their pound of flesh, because had this not come to light right now, I believe Stan Bowman would have been fired. I think he would have been the one to go, and I think it was because he'd been around forever. He hired Colleton. That was his hire. I think probably both of them would be gone, but like Bowman would take the biggest fall. He made the bold moves in the offseason to try and improve the team. They were not improved. So I almost feel like in a way they kind of got given something easy, which I don't like, but maybe he still gets fired. But I don't know who they're going to hire. I was listening to 31 Thoughts, and what Friedman was saying was that Chicago is in a position right now after the pandemic. They're one of the teams that doesn't want to spend money. So who are you going to bring in to be your coach that's not already on your payroll? So one thought is maybe Mark Crawford gets like the interim head coaching gig. Because he's on their staff there and he's got experience, obviously. So would I be surprised? No, but I'm also not going to be surprised if nothing happens.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's just a pattern of history that like if they do bring in a new GM, which they probably will because they kind of have to.
Yeah.
He'll probably come in, watch them lose 60, 70, 80% of their games for like 5 games, and then be like, okay, I want to hire my guy. Or like you say, that guy's out and I'll slide Crawford in. And when you allow it to be so with the money or whatever, I want to do a proper search and find my own guy. Because it feels like the new GMs generally do want to bring in their own coach.
Yeah. And so, yeah, again, I agree. I agree with what you say. The only 2 teams that I'm going to bring up that you haven't touched on, because I feel like we've covered everyone, is I think by far the worst team in the league and possibly the worst team of like, I don't know, the last 30, 40 years in Arizona. I mean, everyone knew what they were doing, right? It's going to be really interesting to see if this pays off better than it did for Buffalo when they completely tanked for McDavid and then didn't get him. But this is like the most obvious complete tank of all time. And I think Beagle's on their first line or something, and their backup goalie is some person I've never heard of, and it's just like it's a disaster in Arizona, but not surprising, but it is bad. And then the other team, which, you know, they got the win last night in Chicago, but as someone that has Mitch Marner in not one but two fantasy leagues. This start by the Toronto Maple Leafs has been like, I find it frustrating. Again, I'm not, you know me, I'm not a Leafs fan. I'm like, I just want someone to get me some points. But like, this team doesn't play. The easiest thing I can say is they do not play for one another. It's the most obvious thing to watch. And again, maybe last night they'll turn it around and now they'll start winning some games, but it's got to be somewhat worrying if you are a Leafs fan, because they are in a pretty tough division. They can't fall too far behind. I know this is probably seen like totally and overreacting to. They're 3-4-1 right now, so it's not like, it's not awful, but the teams that they've lost to have been teams that they should have beat, right? So
yeah, no, I agree. And I was joking the other day, saying, you know, it feels like the Leafs players before the season sat down and watched their own documentary, and totally it caused them to lose all confidence in themselves, because they're not playing very confident, that's for sure.
And yeah, like I understand that losing Zach Hyman was probably a big blow to their team, but it can't be that big a blow. And if it is, then none of those guys making over 10 million deserve that money, like 100%.
Totally.
Yeah. So
yeah, interesting. Lots of interesting things to watch early on this season. So it's been good. It's been interesting. Yeah, that's all I really had for tonight. Did you have anything more you want to touch on there?
No, I think we're cutting it pretty good with the game about to start here. And
that's right. All right. Okay. Well, we'll sign off here, and big coming up. Let's go. Let's go Flyers. There's beers on the line. So thanks for listening, and we will be back to do this again for episode 56 in the future.
Woohoo!